Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, we are continuing with chapter number 15, verse number 6 today. Na tad bhasyate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yad gatva na nivartante tad dhamam paramam mama. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. That supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. A very beautiful verse, which actually is important for us. I'll tell you why. Because in this verse, today's verse, Krishna is giving us a formula, or he's giving us the secret on how to leave the material world when we die, go to the spiritual world and never come back. So we've seen so far, we've heard, the chapter started with the description of the banyan tree, how the banyan tree is the perverted reflection, because this material world is the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. And if somehow or the other we can understand this tree, with its branches and twigs and fruits, etc., then we can say that we have understood the Vedas. Now, the description of this banyan tree, which is upside down, Krishna is talking about this upside down material world. It is, so if there is a real happiness in the spiritual world, which is permanent, so in the material world, it's a perverted reflection. That means the happiness which is here is temporary and it is not real happiness. This happiness has a beginning and it has an end. And Krishna also tells Arjuna it's very difficult to perceive this tree, to really understand this tree. But if one has determination, if one is serious and if one is sincere, then one must cut down this tree. This is what Krishna is advising Arjuna. Because until and unless we cut down this attachment that we have to this material world, we will not get mukti, or we will not have liberation. We won't be liberated. And if we do not qualify ourselves for that position, then we cannot go back to the spiritual world from where we actually came. We heard in chapter 2 that we are spirit souls, and all these different chapters of Bhagavad Gita explain to us who we really are, from where have we come and where do we belong. So if we have come from the spiritual world, that means we belong there. So our goal should be to, when we end this life, we should go back to the spiritual world. In other words, go back to Godhead where we came from. So now Krishna also explained who can come back. You see, there are qualifications necessary, just like when we want to enter a country, a foreign country, then we need to qualify ourselves. We need to get a visa or citizenship so that we can enter into that country. So also we need a visa for the spiritual world. So Krishna is saying, what are the qualifications? The qualifications are, one must be free. That means one should not have all these. One must be free from false prestige, from illusion, from false association, free from lust, free from dualities, and one should not be bewildered. And most important of all these qualifications is one must surrender unto Krishna. Surrender means follow the instructions, which means follow the instructions given in the Bhagavad Gita. So such a person becomes qualified to go to the spiritual world. Now, if one does not cut down this tree of attachment, then what happens? Then Srila Prabhupada explains that one will stay enamored in this material world, will be enamored by the sense, different sense objects which are there, will be enamored by enjoying the senses over here in the material world. And what will be the result of this? One will be endlessly transferring oneself from one body to another, from one species to another species. And it will be like, jumping from one branch of the tree onto the next branch of the tree. And that is, something that an intelligent person wouldn't want to do. So the goal of human form of life should be to break the cycle of birth and death and go to spiritual world where there is permanent happiness. Now, we've been hearing so much about the spiritual world, spiritual world, spiritual world. What exactly is it, right? If we want to go somewhere, it's important that we have knowledge of that location. What is it? What does it look like? How far is it? How do I get there? So today's verse, Krishna is talking about the glories of his abode, the glories of the spiritual abode. What does he say? He says that abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or the moon. Now take, for instance, us in the material world. Soon as there's going to be sunset over here in Atlanta, it's going to get dark. And if we didn't have electricity, there will be no soon, then we can't see anything. You see, the light comes from the sun, and in the night, the light comes from, the electricity, the bulbs. But in the spiritual world, there is no need, there is no fire, there is no electricity, there is no sun, there is no moon. Then how does the spiritual world light up? Krishna says that illumination that is seen in the spiritual world is his effulgence, the effulgence that comes out from Krishna's body. That is what is, the reason for the light in the spiritual world. And more important part of this verse is, Krishna says, those who reach my abode, they never return. Never is very important word, which means there is no doubt at all. Once someone comes to the spiritual world, abode of Krishna, then one does not come back into this material world, which means there will be no more birth, no disease, no old age, and no death. There will be permanent life, permanent happiness in spiritual body, in the spiritual world. In fact, we learn from the Bhagavad Gita a very beautiful verse where Krishna says, Abrahma bhuvana loka punar avartino Arjuna. Mamopetya tu kantaya punar janmana vidyate. Punar janma. No more birth. Krishna says, from the highest planet, material planet, which is Brahmaloka, he says, even if one reaches the Brahmaloka, still one has to come back. But Mamopetya, Krishna says, someone who reaches me, who reaches my abode, who comes to my spiritual world, that person does not come back again. You see? So we are seeing how glorious it is to go to the spiritual world where Krishna resides. So today we are, from this verse, understanding the glories of the spiritual world. Now, Krishna's spiritual world is called Krishna Loka, or Goloka Vrindavan. This is the name of his abode. Now, there are many Vaikuntha planets, which means many spiritual planets are there, but the topmost or the highest spiritual planet is called Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavana. And since this verse today explains that there is no need for the sun or the moon or the fire or the electricity, then it's just the shining effulgence coming from Krishna's spiritual body that is sufficient to light up his entire planet. Now, we know that all planets are self-luminous. And in the material world, we have only the sun, you know. So, but the Vaikuntha planets, they do not have a sun or moon. They are illumined by the effulgence of Krishna. Now, Vaikuntha, I've explained this before. Kuntha means anxiety. Vaikuntha means no anxiety. That means the Vaikuntha planets are a place where there is no anxiety at all. So the effulgence that is coming from Krishna's body is also called Brahma Jyoti, and the main effulgence comes from Krishna Loka, and Krishna Loka is the chief of all the Vaikuntha planets, and then the whole effulgence is shining everywhere else. So this is how glorious Krishna's spiritual world is. Now, in the Rig Veda, there is a very nice a verse in Purusha Shukta mantra, which says, Pado asya vishwa bhutani tripadasyamritam divi. That this material world is only 1/4 of the whole creation, and 3/4 or 3/4 is the spiritual world. That means the spiritual world is 3 times bigger than this material world. So what is the translation of this word, this Sanskrit that I just read from Rig Veda? It says, this temporary world made from the material energy is but one part of the Supreme Divine Personality. The other 3 parts are his eternal abodes that are beyond the phenomenon of birth and death, which means those 3 parts, which are the spiritual worlds, they are beyond birth and death. That means there is no birth, no death, no disease or old age in the spiritual world. So since we hear how glorious it is, you know, the spiritual world, you know, is so glorious, and it has everything required for permanent happiness. So if one decides that, okay, after this life, I don't want to come back to this material world, but I want to go to the spiritual world. And if that is the goal, then Krishna says we need to cut down this material tree. This attachment that we have with the material world, that needs to be cut down, because here in the material world, there is darkness, there is, you know, we need artificial light when the sun sets, you know. So if one needs to get liberated, if one wants to reach the spiritual planet, then one must follow the process given to us by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Because if now that we have this knowledge from this chapter also, that there is no suffering in the material, in the spiritual world, there is no birth, no death, there is permanent happiness over there, no suffering. And the main point is we don't come back into this material world. So if we have all this knowledge, then an intelligent person will think that, well, this is something I should, you know, aim for. This should be my goal, that I mold my life in such a way that I am conscious of Krishna all the time. You see, because we do not know when the end is going to come. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to live for 100 years. Says who? Do we have an appointment with death? Did someone tell us that we are going to die on such a such day or year or whatever? No, there is no guarantee at all. So if we want to take this human form of life seriously, then we should take a Bhagavad Gita seriously, the knowledge from Bhagavad Gita seriously, because as long as a person is conditioned means materialistic, condition means is habituated to, you know, just thinking about the body, being on the bodily concept of life, only thinking about how to feed the body, how to decorate the body, how to enjoy the body, but forgets to feed the soul, forgets to give knowledge, forgets to do the mantra meditation. If one does not do what is required, then one becomes more and more conditioned. And the more we get conditioned, the more we will have to stay here in this material world. Only those, Krishna says, only those who have purified themselves and qualified themselves, they will be able to get liberated and come to the spiritual world where there is permanent happiness. In fact, in chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives us the peace formula. He says, Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwara Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam Gnatva Mam Shanti Mrichati. Shanti means peace of mind. He gives a formula that as soon as someone understands that Krishna is the Bhokta, he is the enjoyer. Unfortunately, in the material world, we think we are the enjoyers. You see, Krishna, the Supreme Lord, is the enjoyer, and everyone belongs to him. Everyone needs to serve him. When we try to understand that Krishna is our best friend, Suhridam, he is our best friend. He knows the best that is required for us, you see. So when we start taking on this knowledge and putting it into practice, then we gradually starts removing the conditioning. There is gradual purification. Why is it that in every class I chant the Maha Mantra after the class? Why is it I talk about mantra meditation being so important? Because it is. Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantasya dhridavrataha namastasya cha namam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. Nitya, eternally. We need to practice devotional service eternally, which means all the time. No matter what we are doing, whether we are going to work, business, job, school, college, home, whatever we may be doing, if we stay conscious of Krishna all the time, then we will start getting purified gradually. Purification means all the unwanted things from the heart will be removed, like lust, anger, greed, pride, etc. So if one is really interested in being permanently happy and peaceful, then Bhagavad Gita is the answer. So as Prahlad Maharaj, he gives the 9 processes of devotional service in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the first one is Shravanam, means hearing. So when we hear the Bhagavad Gita, then a desire should develop, a desire to end this cycle of suffering. One should, just like if I want to progress in my business, say I've started business and I want to progress, I want to make profit, I want to move forward, then I will definitely need to make a plan, right? A plan is necessary. Just like when our children are born, we make a plan for their education, which school they will go to, which college they will go to. We make a plan. So also in spirituality, we need to make a plan. A plan should be such, that we can come out of this cycle of birth, disease, old age, and death. And how is that possible? Krishna says by cutting down this material tree, which means by detachment, because this material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. That means the real thing is up there in the spiritual world. So once we go to our original home, then there's going to be permanent happiness. Unfortunately, most people in this material world are very attached to materialism. I will give you an example. Say I keep a bag of grains in the middle of the road. I just leave it there. So when the birds come, they just pick 2 3 grains, as much as they require or as much as they can take in their beak, and then they will fly and they'll be satisfied, right? But if a person, a human being, is walking and sees a bag of grain, he's just going to take the whole bag with him. Why? Because he will say, okay, today maybe I'll just need a handful of grains, but what about tomorrow? What about day after tomorrow? What about next month? What about next year? So this is how the brain of a human being works. So this is what the attachment is. It's always after possessions. I need this and I need that. Keep collecting possessions, and then finally we see that, oh, there is no place in the house to keep anymore. Like the house becomes so crowded. That is called attachment to materialism, which is very, very difficult to cut. So if we understand that, yes, this material world is temporary, in this material world, there is no permanent happiness. In this material world, there is the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. So it's important to understand that this materialistic items also are not going to give me happiness. Money is there today, not there tomorrow. Position is there today, may not be tomorrow. I have possessions today, I may not have them tomorrow. So we are very fortunate. In fact, Krishna has been so compassionate to us that even though this knowledge was being gradually lost, 5,000 years ago, he re-spoke the Bhagavad Gita for us. So this is a golden opportunity for us. We have access to the Bhagavad Gita as it is by Srila Prabhupada. We have access to each other, all of us, we are practicing devotional service, so we can call ourselves devotees. So we have association of devotees, we have very, very important part of this practice is the parampara, the disciplic succession, the bona fide disciplic succession that is coming down from Krishna down to Srila Prabhupada. So we have all the tools that are necessary to help us to break the cycle of birth and death. What more do we want? If we have all these, everything served to us on a golden platter, then why should we waste this human form of life, right? Let's say, in this lifetime, I am very materialistic, I only want to accumulate a lot of wealth. There's nothing wrong in doing that as long as the consciousness is correct. So I am spending my whole life collecting. And then, like I'm also interested in, education. I get big degrees like a PhD or doctorate or whatever it is. I am just getting all that I can acquire. But at the time of death, I have to leave behind everything. I cannot take anything with me at the time of death. I have to go empty-handed, just like I came empty-handed. When I was born, I didn't have anything with me, you see. But gradually, as I grew up, I started collecting. I got good education. I got some nice credit cards, good fat bank balance, etc., etc. But what will I do with all that? At the time of death, everything is left behind. You see, all our achievements, they become zero. So, it's important to understand that, yes, we need to work. We need to go to a job. We need to maintain the body and soul together. We need to pay our bills, sure. But we should make sure that side by side, we also practice spirituality. Both go hand in hand, material life and spiritual life. We don't want to, waste this human form of life. And, at the time of death, when everything becomes zero, we don't want to start back all over from scratch, be born again like a baby and then grow, etc., etc. So when we associate with like-minded people, like those who are following Bhagavad Gita or those who are reading Bhagavad Gita, when we associate with devotees, then gradually a desire develops to progress. You see, then with the association of devotees and hearing this knowledge over and over again, then we learn how to detach ourselves from this material world. It is easy, and yet at the same time it is difficult also. Now it is easy because the process is very easy. Why is it difficult? Because since such a long time we are attached. So to detach, it will take some time. How to detach from this material world? Now, of course, when we gradually, when we start practicing mantra meditation on a daily basis, then gradually our existence will start getting purified. And then we will learn, how we can perform everything for Krishna. All our activities will turn from service to devotional service. Like we will try to dovetail everything in Krishna's service, which means we will keep Krishna in the center of all our activities. This is how our consciousness will change. And this is how we will learn how to surrender the fruits of our activities to Krishna. We learned this in chapter 3 and 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, how we should perform karma yoga, how we should perform akarma, which means we follow the instructions given in the Bhagavad Gita, do our work to our best ability, but we do not desire to enjoy the fruits of our activities. So that is the state of consciousness which is required to lead a karma-free life. Because what happens, every action has a reaction, whether it is good or bad. And we want neither of them. We don't want good reactions or bad reactions. We want zero reactions. That is when we will become qualified to not come back into this material world again. So while we are living in this material world, we can learn the art, the art of performing work in such a way that it becomes a devotion to Krishna. Let me explain it in this way. Say, there is a man who is holding on to a pillar and is crying out, I'm hungry, please someone give me food. And here is one person passing by and says, here is the food for you, please take. He says, oh, how can I take the food from you because I'm holding on to the pillar? Well, if he really wants to eat, if he wants to get over the hunger, he has to let go of the pillar, you see. So if we want to be attached to something, if we want to detach ourselves from something, we have to attach ourselves to something, right? So just like this man, until and unless he detached himself from the pillar, he was not able to attach himself to the food. Right. So if we want, if we want to detach ourselves from this material consciousness, best thing is to attach ourselves to spiritual consciousness. When we do that, then detachment becomes very easy. So what do we attach ourselves to? Devotional service to Krishna. Then our detachment from materialistic life will be automatic. We won't have to put in any endeavor. Now, sometimes people get scared that if you are talking so much about, getting materially detached, does that mean that I'll stop loving my family? No. There is a huge difference between attachment and affection. You see, affection to the family will still be there. It's just that the attachment will go away. Now, how do we know, that it's very simple. Say, for instance, the parents, right? Parents are obviously very attached to their children. So if they really want to be affectionate to their children, then what do? They give material education and spiritual education side by side. That becomes affection. If the parents only give material education to the children, then that's attachment. Why? Because the parents are only thinking about the body of the child, that let my child study, get good degrees and then get a good job and get married and have children, etc., etc. But if side by side the parents are giving spiritual education also, like explaining to the children, who they really are, where they come from, what is the goal of human life, teach them mantra meditation, then that is showing affection to the children, because the parents are taking care of both the body and the soul of the child. So when we get attached to Krishna's service, then detachment from materialistic life reduces automatically. Now, that doesn't mean that we give up everything material. No. For instance, I'm using this laptop today to speak about the Bhagavad Gita. It's a material thing, but it's being used in Krishna's service by spreading the knowledge of Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita. So actually, the laptop can be considered to be a spiritual item because it's being used in service of Krishna. So we can use material things without attachment to them, and automatically there's going to be detachment. So it's important that we take up devotional service seriously. It's not casual. Bhakti yoga is not casual where, oh, today I feel like, so I will. Tomorrow I don't feel like, so I won't. No, it's not casual. Bhakti yoga is a very serious thing. It is a serious endeavor to break the cycle of misery. You see, most people in the material world, they forget that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord, everything. Because we came empty-handed, nothing belongs to us. We're going to go empty-handed because nothing belongs to us. So if everything belongs to Krishna, then it behooves us to use it in his service. So the verse of today is talking about the glories of the spiritual world. The spiritual world is actually considered paramam, which means it's full of six opulences, and also we heard from this verse that the spiritual world is illuminated by Krishna's effulgence, the internal potency of Krishna. The whole spiritual sky is illuminated by internal potency of Krishna. So we can see that, these are the glories, some of the glories of the spiritual world. And that is the place where our focus should be, that, yes, when I give up this body, I would like to go to the spiritual world where there is permanent happiness. There is no birth, disease, old age, or death. So how do we do that? How do we attain that goal? Is it easy? Yes. All we need to do is just follow the Bhagavad Gita, which is, in fact, towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita in 18th chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna, Sarva dharman parityagya mam ekam sharanam vraja. Aham tum sarva papebhyo moksha ishyami masucha. He says, do not fear, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I will remove all the sinful reactions. Do not fear. So Krishna is ready to remove all our sinful reactions, to make that, make the sinful reactions go to zero. You see, he's ready to do that, but what does he want us to do? Abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto him. Surrender means follow his instructions from the Bhagavad Gita. And that is the only way to achieve the spiritual world. There is no other way, absolutely no other way. In fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's Krishna himself, he came over 500 years ago and he very clearly said, Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam, Kalau Nasteva, 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 Gatiranatha. That in Kali Yuga, Kalau, in Kali Yuga, there is no other way, no other way, no other way except chanting, chanting, chanting. Harinam. Harinam is chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Just like I was chanting just before we started the class, right? I was chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. You all, have been coming to the class, so I know you have, you know the Maha Mantra, and you also have all the links. So, I'll just chant few more on few more beads, and I would humbly request that you also, please, sitting in your homes, please chant with me just for a few minutes, because this is how we will be able to, start getting detached from the material world. So let's chant for a few minutes. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So you see, I chanted 10 times. So it would be nice if you could chant 100 times at least once a day. So that would be really good. So I'm going to end here. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome.